Now we're going to tackle about the speech and language disorder. So what is speech and language disorder? So it's difficulties with communicating, encompassing both speech and language, or understanding and using words and sentences. So these disorders can affect a person's ability to express themselves, understand others, or produce speech sounds correctly. Speech disorder also are communication disorders such as stuttering, impaired articulation, and language or voice impairment. When we say stuttering, this is a speech disorder that disrupts the normal flow of speech. It involves breaks or interruptions in speech, causing unintended sounds, pauses, or difficulty speaking smoothly. There are 4 types of speech disorder. The first one is articulation disorder. When we say articulation disorder, a child is unable to produce a given sound physically. Severe articulation disorder may render a child's speech unintelligible. So for example, I want a blue lollipop. So instead, they say, I want a boo-woo-pop. So that's the example of articulation disorder. So the second one is phonological disorder. A child produces multiple patterns of sounds error with obvious impairment of intelligibility. So this is also noted inconsistent misarticulation of sounds. Sometimes a child is able to articulate it but not in other words. For example, instead of that pie is good, they can say cat pie is stood. The third one is fluency disorder. When we say fluency disorder, it is a difficulties with the rhythm and timing of speech. Stuttering is an example, marked by rapid-fire repetitions of consonant or vowel sounds, especially at the beginning of words, prolonginations, hesitations, interjections, and complete verbal blocks. And another type is cluttering. That's when you speak fast and jam words together or say often. The last disorder is voice disorder. Problems with the quality or use of one's voice resulting from disorders of the larynx. Voice may be excessively hoarse, breathy, or too high-pitched. So laryngitis means voice changes related to the brain and nervous system known as spasmodic or spasmodic dysphonia. So let's proceed to language disorder. So language disorder are characterized by persistent difficulties in use of language that result from deficits in comprehension that include reduced vocabulary, limited sentence structure, and impairment in the source that limit a child's functioning. Language disorder also involve the processing of linguistic information. Problems that may be experienced can involve grammar, semantics, or other aspects of language. So these problems may be receptive, expressive, or a combination of both. There are 3 types of language disorder. The first is receptive language disorder. Individuals with these disorders have trouble understanding language, including words, sentences, and direction. So, mixed receptive expressive language disorder is a communication disorder in which both the receptive and expressive areas of communication may be affected in any degree, from mild to severe. So, children with these disorders have difficulty understanding words and sentences. The second is expressive language disorder. So this disorder affects the ability to communicate verbally. Expressive language disorder is one of the specific developmental disorder of speech and language recognized by the 10th edition of the International Classification of Disease. As of the 11th edition, it is considered to be covered by the various categories of developmental language disorder. So it is also a condition in which a child has lower than normal ability in vocabulary, saying complex complex sentences and remembering words. However, a child with this disorder may have the normal language skills needed to understand verbal or written communication. The last is mixed receptive expressive language disorder. So these are combines the challenges of both receptive and expressive language disorders. Individuals may have difficulty understanding and using language, impacting both comprehension and communication. At this point, it is also essential to mention that students with autism spectrum disorder or ASD also display speech and language difficulties. ASD is an umbrella term for related disorders that affect social development and communication. How do specialists determine a speech and or language problem? So let's tackle about this. So let's go first to hearing. So hearing is tested to determine whether an organic hearing problem is the cause of suspected communication disorder, as discussed in the previous section. Thus, hearing impairment needs to be treated to develop speech and language skills. In conclusion, despite these language difficulties, children with communication disorders are known to have their own strengths and abilities. This can be best understood using the theory of multiple intelligence, and also it shows the different strengths and abilities children have. So children with communication disorders may have limitations in the linguistic and interpersonal areas, but may possess good spatial, musical, and bodily kinesthetic abilities. And that would be all. Thank you.